G'day and welcome back to the channel. On this episode we are finally reassembling Grace's gearbox with a straight cut gearbox conversion. But before we start, let's crack a beer. Now, I generally don't drink in my videos simply because it's not good publicity, but I'm just having a beer here just to celebrate finally being able to put this thing back together. It has been quite a few weeks since you guys last saw the last episode, but in actual YouTube time, it's probably a matter of seconds. There's a couple of issues getting the parts over here from the UK, but we finally got there. So thanks very much, Paul Jeffries, for sending me the stuff required to do it. So guys, grab yourself a frothy, a cold one, a hot one, whatever it is that you drink, sit back and enjoy the episode. All right, so I do have the new shaft here. I didn't film it because I didn't think it was really necessary to film the disassembly of swapping the shafts over. Essentially, the nose cones are slightly different, which you can see in the picture to the side of me, and therefore it takes different bearings. Now we've got the right bearings, we have the right cones, everything works in unison. So we have it all put together. It was a little bit dicking around. They are very fiddly to do, so if you're ever going to attempt this, please just be very, very mindful that it's not hard to do. It's just one of those things that you just need patience to be able to sit there and just work it out before you just go ham and try and put it all back together. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So we have the layshaft just here. This is the new one. It does have a slight taper just down here, as well as a step just there, and that is for the A+ gearbox. Now, like Paul Jeffries was saying in the previous video, is we need to make this thing go a little bit further down. So as you can see, it is bottoming out just here against this lip. Now, if we are to try and line that up, I'll just grab the torch so you can see. If we are trying to line up that reverse lockout, you can see that it's not completely at the very end. There's probably a couple of mil there in which we need to trim off to be able to get it to fit. Now, by doing that, all we need to do is pull this shaft out, and we just need to take off the edge of this bit just down in here where it goes in. I'll pull that shaft all the way out so you can see a little bit better. So this edge just here, we're going to grab a stepped drill bit, and we're just going to take off probably about 2 mil. Essentially what we want is for this to come through and be lined up with the back side of this lip. So you want the gearbox casing, where my fingernail is, to be lined up directly against it. But essentially, it needs to sit something along the lines of that one down in there. So essentially, it needs to sit along the lines of what this reverse one is right here. So if I just push that in just a little bit, essentially you need that edge to be lined up directly with the gearbox casing on the edge of the shaft. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take out the reverse gear. We are then going to grab a stepped drill bit and give it a bit of a buzz. All right, so what I've done here is to be able to gain access, I've grabbed my Makita drill. I've put a couple of bits on the end, got an extension. I've got a socket followed by a stepped drill bit. Essentially, all I'm going to do is just give it a couple little light buzzes just to be able to cut it through into the gearbox housing. Now, as you can see, I do have a rag in there. It just saves me pulling everything apart and then having metal go everywhere. All right, so I've just finished doing the first little cut. I'm going to do piece by piece. That way I'm not going to go too far. All right, so with this modification, it is important that you do it millimeter by millimeter. So I'm just going to grab the shaft. We're going to reassemble it inside here and see how much more we need to take off. So we push it all the way in. Okay, until it stops. Yeah, so that's still just touching there. It's still nowhere near where we need it to be. So we got to just keep doing it. It's just literally take it in and out one at a time, give it a little bit more meat on there, or sorry, take a little bit more meat off, and then once you've done it, it's just a case of just doing it piece by piece to get it to recess in there, only probably about 2 millimeters, so it's not much. Don't know what that equates to in an inch, but I'll try and remember to put it down below. But yeah, just do it piece by piece. Don't just sit there and go ham. Don't cut right into it. You just want to get it so it's just flush with the end where the reverse lockout goes. All right, I've done a few cuts. As you can see, just down there, hopefully you can see it. It's got the little recess in there. So if we just push that all the way to the end, we'll come around here and have a look. Yep, perfect. So essentially what we want to be able to do, that's just the reverse lockout. That little tab, you need to make sure that can fit. Pretty sure it goes that way. No, it goes this way. Fit inside there at the end. It's just a little bit hard to do it one-handed with the camera, so I'll just hopefully try and rotate it around. Essentially, so long as that tab can go in the end, which this is not going to want to cooperate. We should be okay. So just looking at the lay shaft now, trying to fit that inside there, it is quite firm. So what I'm going to have to do is just probably grab the file and just give it like a light skim just along here, just to mill off the fraction, the bloody bee's dick of where we need this to sit. Otherwise it's not going to go in properly. I'd say it's just very, very, very minutely a little bit tight. So as you can see there, it's not going to go in properly, but that's not a problem. That's something we can just mill down piece by piece until we get it to where we need it to be. So what I'm going to do now is, because we have the rag inside here, there is going to be a little bit of debris inside there, which I accounted for, but we're going to stick it in the parts washer, or at least the parts tub. I'm going to give it a good clean and then get rid of all the swarf that's in there. But the good thing is, because there is metal, well, not metal, but it's alloy in oil, I can just stick it in the bucket, just wash the entire thing out, get rid of all the debris. Once it's all done, we can then start the reassembly process. Right, so now is the fun part of installing the center oil pickup, like we learnt on Kyle's Mini. If you haven't already, make sure you check it out in the link above or on my channel. We're going to be installing this, but the best way to do it is, you would assume, to install it prior to installing the lay shaft, but you can't actually do that because how's it going to fit in there? So we are going to try and manipulate this thing, hopefully down, in and around there like that. Actually that's going to work quite well. That should really work in the best possible way. But before we do, it is worthwhile noting that the A series as well as A plus gearboxes are slightly different, not just in the sizes but also the bearings in which they take inside the lay shaft assembly. Alright, so like the original lay shaft, they do have different size bearings. So obviously the smaller one is going to go at this end, the larger one is going to go at this end. Now, the difference also is not only the size of the shaft, but also at this end on the A series engine, it has 2 bearings, whereas the later one has only 1. Okay, so I'm hoping I can kind of cheat here. Just wiggle it up, put it into position, and then we just need to put the thrust washers in as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit it there, I'm going to grab the thrust washers, we're going to stick one on this end and then one on this end. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll work. Now, there are 2 different size thrust washers. There is a large one and there's a small one. The large one, let's just make sure it goes on the end. Yep, that's perfect. And the smaller one goes on the small end. So they're only going one way. That is one thing you really, really, really need to be sure of, is when you're reassembling this, because otherwise you're going to have a bad time and it's not going to go together. So what I'm hopefully going to be able to do, slide this one. Actually, I'm going to move the lay shaft out, the lay gear, should I say. I'm going to slide it back in, just with the lock tab in there, and then I should be able to just push the lay shaft in, get it line up, perfect, that's going in. Let's give it a little bit of love to go all the way through. Oh, okay, so just need to make sure that we line up the other side correctly. So I'm just going to give it a bit of a rotate and push at the same time. Yep, so it is a little bit firm. So the bearing started to jump out at this end. All I'm going to do is just grab a screwdriver, just push the lay shaft back. Okay, I'm just going to push the bearing back just a fraction, just because it's come out of the lay gear, shall I say. Then we're going to grab the small thrust washer, slide it down in there, and then we should be right to push all the way home. So to line that up, all I need to do is grab a small screwdriver, just lift it up and just keep applying pressure to the lay shaft itself until it lines up with where it needs to sit, and then it should just push all the way in. Alright, so I just had a bit of a moment. I was really struggling to get the lay shaft through the lay gear and it just simply wouldn't engage, and I thought, what the absolute hell is going on? Turns out I had the reverse gear around the wrong way. So it is worthwhile noticing that, or mentioning, should I say, that reverse is only going to go in one way. They are offset, and where the gear is, it only engages one way on the gear. So if you put it in and it starts to get stuck and you can't get the layshaft all the way through, then likely that the reverse gear is around the wrong way. All you need to do is pull that pin back out, flip it 180, line it up with the little notch in there, which enables it to slide back and forth, put it back in and slide it all the way through. Now, the issue that I'm currently having is I've pushed this essentially all the way home, but it feels to me like it's starting to bottom out on this washer here. So if I pull this back, take that thrust washer out, realign it, slide it all the way back through, just give it a bit of a wiggle. That slides all the way into where we need it to be. So what I actually need to do is machine, well not machine, but grab my trusty file and give that a little bit of a file on the inside just to take off a little bit of a burr. That way it can slide all the way on to the lay shaft. Alright, so a really good demonstration here is it slides all the way down through here, but it just doesn't go over that lip. So we need to make it just that little bit bigger to be able to fit over here. Ideally, you could just put this on a mill or a lathe and just machine probably about 2 mil off there. But all we're going to do is just make this slightly a little bit bigger. That way it sits on that second step just here and it can recess inside where it needs to be. I'd probably say that these thrust washers are slightly different compared to the A-series engines. So I've actually got two options here. Is I've just started filing it for the last 5 minutes and it's still barely taking anything off it. I've got two options. One is that I can go buy another thrust washer for the smaller side and then that should be right, or I grab my die grinder and just start to take out little bits at a time out of here. Using a file is certainly the most preferred method, but is also going to be the longest method involved in this process. So I'd probably much prefer just get my die grinder and just sit there for a little bit longer and just machine it out piece by piece. Alternatively, like I said, you could just machine this down just a little bit to be able to get it to recess properly. Therefore, it's actually going to go a little bit further down this step here rather than onto this one. Now, the awkward moment when you go to reassemble it and realize that you can't actually put it all together with the gear cluster in there in which the lay shaft gear assembly is. So we are putting all this back together. Now, Tomo's tech tip here is make sure that when you reassemble it, all of the selector forks actually line up with the hubs. If they don't, you're going to have a very bad time trying to select the gear. Once they're in, you can then keep the reassembly process going. Now, what we need to do is install this end first and then this end. The reason why is if we install this first, it's going to push the shaft this way. When we install this end, it's actually got a circlip on the end which prevents it traveling out any further. So we're going to push this all the way in and then we're going to fit the bearing at this end. So the next part we need to do is install this end bearing here at this end. So we're going to assemble pretty much this side and then we're going to slide the lay shaft gear assembly in. Now, don't forget as well, you need to fit a new baulk ring. These are really important to make sure that you check not only the clearance between the baulk ring and the gear, but also if you got it apart, for the cost of it, you might as well upgrade it. So slide that in through there, line up the baulk ring to where it needs to be, and then we can put the bearing on there. So we're going to fit the bearing on this end first. That way when we push it in, it's only going to go as far as what it needs to. Put the circlip on and then that's locked in position. Then we can fit this one. So all we need to do now is grab the bearing and we're going to push it all the way in, and then we're going to grab our punch and we're going to finish driving it in. Tomo's tech tip here is when pressing in a bearing, push on the inside. When pressing it out, you want to be pressing on the outside. All right, so just give it a couple little taps there to get started. Okay. Grab your punch and then drive it home. Alright, so once it changes sound audibly, make sure that it spins nice and freely, and then you're right to put the circlip back in. So once again, grab the biggest pair of internal circlip pliers you own, slide it inside there, push it in, make sure that she's home. And a really good way to know is if it's home, grab your punch or a screwdriver, put it on the edge of it, and just rotate it. If it rotates smoothly and doesn't move, chances are it's all the way home. Next thing is I've flipped the gearbox around and we're going to stick this bearing in. Now the good thing about this bearing is it has a circlip all the way around the outside which prevents it going any further than what it needs. So that's going to go in facing like that. So this is going to face the gear cluster and that's going to be on the outside. That way it's going to help to prevent it going any further, like I said before, than what it needs to be. We are going to be pushing on the inside of the bearing to push it in. Right, so once again, once you got the bearing in there and it's seated all the way home and you're positive that it's gone all the way, you can then start the reassembly process internally of the rest of the gearbox. Make sure as well, like I just said, that everything moves freely inside the gearbox. You don't want anything to be tight, you don't want anything to be binding, you want everything to move independently. Alright, so I just had a couple little dilemmas getting the vehicle into the different gears. So I've just gone through, made sure that reverse selects first and second as well as third and fourth. Now that I've confirmed all of that, everything is moving fine, the selector's all good, I can now keep the reassembly process going. So the next step is to install the center oil pickup along with the lay shaft and lay gear assembly. Alright, so essentially what you want to do is put it all in at the same time. It is a little bit fiddly, but like I showed you before, you just got to work it in there. So pretty much get the center oil pickup where you need it to sit, and then get your lay shaft and line it up. So the oil pickup's where it needs to be. I'm just going to put this large thrust washer in once again, and sometimes even roll the lay gear assembly down into there, into position, just like that, and then you pretty much have it lined up. So grab the lay shaft, slide in. Once again, make sure that your bearings are in both sides, otherwise you're going to have a very bad time pretty damn quick. Make sure you put in the smaller thrust washer up this end. Slide it all the way through. Spin the gears, make sure they're all turning, which they appear to be. Just move that oil pickup. Terrific. That's pretty much everything. They're all lining up. Oh, they're all in where they need to be. A little bit of oil is going to help them move a little bit, but they're all nice and moving freely with no resistance whatsoever. So we can keep going with the reassembly process. Alright, so essentially what you need to be doing next is doing the oil pickup as well as the oil pickup feed pipe just here. Make sure you're using your gasket, put some sealant on both sides. I'll bolt through here. If you can use a nylock nut, use that because that's going to definitely help hold it. If not, just use a little bit of Loctite like I've shown you on previous episodes. Once you've done that, start reassembling the diff housing, line everything up on this end like I've shown you in previous episodes, and how you pulled it apart. Once you've done all that, you can then reinstall the bearing on this side, so the transfer case housing side. So the next step after you've tightened everything on this side of the engine, so the transfer case or clutch housing, you assemble everything on this side. Make sure to lock it in 2 gears, that way you can lock the shaft, do up the nuts on either end, reassemble this end, so the diff side of it, reassemble the diff, put the diff in and make sure you do the diff shimming, reassemble everything on this side, put all new gaskets and seals in. If you need to replace anything, make sure you do it now. Well guys, that's it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it and you learned how to transform a series gearbox into an A+ gearbox. Like I said, this is quite a large thing that you can do. It is a great project to take on yourself, but it can be quite expensive if you don't have the right connections and know the right people to help you out with it. Thank goodness my good mate Paul Jeffries in the UK helped me out with a lot of these parts, so I'm super grateful of him. So thank you very much, Paul. I greatly appreciate your help. So as I said, this job can be done almost by anyone, so long as you just take your time, you have all the right tools and equipment, you follow each step of the process, and you can ensure that this will go back together correctly. Make sure as well when you put it all back together that everything that you're touching, moving, everything that has any sort of moving part, everything moves freely. You don't want to put it all back together, go to select first gear and then it gets jammed. So as you go, make sure you test each component along the way. Make sure it's got free range of movement and there's nothing binding. If there is, pull it back apart and reassess it. If you're unsure, seek professional advice. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Make sure you check out minisport.com.au for all the parts that I use, and I'll try and remember to put a list down below in the link in the description of everything that I've used to get to this point in this conversion. Hope you liked the episode, and we'll see you right here on another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups.